Welcome to the Love Now Movement interview series hosted by Australian powerhouse spiritual teacher Susie Mazzoli. Together with a New York filmmaker Kevin Lewis, presents cutting-edge information in the field of consciousness, spirituality, science, and culture. We present in-depth interviews with the international movers and shakers, agents of change, and explore our rapid, expanded world. Come and join us on our Love Now across the world.
Annelie Whitfield is with us from England, also now living in Costa Rica for a few years. And Annelie is a naturopath. She was a stunt woman and has been in lots of really big, famous movies. She is a mother of two beautiful little girls, and she is a food alchemist. And today we're going to speak especially about working with children and how to feed our families, how to feed our kids, how to make sure our children are wonderfully happy, well-nourished, and of course completely aligned with Mother Earth. So my first really big question to you, Annelie, and thanks so much for being with us, is what is your ethos around food, around nutrition, around all the stuff that we put in through this big hole here?
Very good question, Susie. My ethos around food is, it's very, very simple. It's just basically to, in every moment that you're hungry, you just need to look at what the freshest and the most organic and the most locally produced food is. So what can you find that fits those criteria? And that's what we should be eating. I think we need to get out of all these sort of rigid dietary paradigms, because
which there are a lot of right now.
There are a lot of, and I think it's very confusing, and there's so much information about how we should eat. And of course, we all have to eat completely differently because we've all got different metabolic types, and we're all going through different things emotionally and physically. So things change from day to day, but we all know inside of ourselves instinctively what really suits us. So some people, need more protein and more fat than others. Some people need a little bit more carbohydrate. So it's like that. So we can't really...
And that also changes too during your life, whether childhood or adult. And I know too, as women, I know I ate very differently when I was pregnant as to after pregnancy or after breastfeeding.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, your metabolic type changes when you're pregnant. It changes when you go through great times of stress. So you have to adapt to that. And I think if people could just get into that, make that their reality, rather than looking to the outside for the answers for their health and well-being and the things that concern women, for example, like their weight and the way they look and all of these kind of issues, because obviously weight loss books and books, every health food book, every dietary book is sold on losing weight, which is terrible, really, because this is playing to people's weakness. And if people just tuned in with themselves, firstly, they'll know exactly what their needs are in view of in regards to protein and fats and carbohydrates.
But let me ask you, will they know their needs? Because I notice, like, sometimes, like, if you've been on a binge or something, then your body's been set up for like the wrong type of cravings. So don't you have to have like almost like a flat line place where you're in a healthy state where you then can listen to your body? Because like if you've been eating a lot of sugar or coffee, then your body's going to go sugar, coffee.
Well, actually, it's the other way around. When you've had a big binge and you have taken yourself way out of balance, that is the time when you're more instinctive about what your body needs. Because your body is its craving, its needs are so much more. So when you've been out and you've got really drunk and then you've binged on some
I never do that.
No, of course.
I never do that.
No, I know.
Back in the day.
When one does that, it's actually a very good time to check back in with yourself and know exactly what your needs are, because your body is if there are some issues with, for example, magnesium is a big deficiency we see in society today due to stress and this kind of thing, and the overconsumption of certain foods like sugar, which use up magnesium. So when you've really sort of overdone it and you are at a balance, those sort of minerals will show up, and you really will be drawn to the foods that have these minerals and vitamins in it. And usually when you have sort of got yourself out of balance, you do want to get back into balance. So that is a good time to check in with yourself. And I just think I just think we should really declutter ourselves as far as dietary regimes go, and we really need to sort of let them go, and people should stop writing books on diet and how everyone should eat. It's because it's too overwhelming, it's very confusing. I think what we should do is share beautiful recipes, share beautiful ways to make food ecstatic and divine and healthful, and that should cover every type of food.
So, and you were talking about too that, which is so in line with my thinking and my worldview, is that it's all about frequency, the frequency of food.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, of course, the frequency of food is exactly what it's about, and that really falls into theme with what I said about eating. You know, really just looking. If you're in a restaurant, for example, like, what should I eat? You know, women especially get terribly sort of confused. They're looking at the menu thinking, that's got more calories, and is that, but it's not vegan.
Oh my gosh, I never think about stuff
like
that.
No, neither do I. Neither do I. We're really lucky. Right. We're sort of out of that. We've freed ourselves up. But most people do. So when we're looking at a menu, we have to think, what is the best frequency, you know, item on the what item on this menu has got the best frequency? And that really falls in line with, well, what's the most locally sourced thing on this menu? You know, what's had to fly 3,000 miles to be here on my plate, and what's actually just been caught in a river down the road, or what's been picked in that wood.
Right, which we don't really know so many times. You're looking at a menu, you have no idea where the carrots and peas have come from in your stir fry, right?
No, that's true. That is true. But you kind of know what's in season.
Yeah.
So if it's the middle of the summer, then we're not going to be so much into the root vegetables. And if we're in the middle of winter, we're probably not growing so much salad. And if we're not living near the sea...
So eat more seasonally as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It's always... so if it's locally sourced, it's got to be seasonal.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're not going to be eating shellfish if we're an awfully long way away from the sea, from the coast, for example.
Now, I know a lot of nutritionists actually advise against shellfish because they are bottom feeders, and do you also stay away from shellfish? She sells seashells by the seashore. Do you stay away from them as well for that reason?
I do. I mean,
do too.
I do. I don't. It's not my choice at all. I don't really. No, I don't eat shellfish.
And also,
I don't really like them. But it's not.
The mercury levels too.
They're much higher in shellfish. We do know that. Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't like to say. I don't like to ever give a label. What's good? What's bad? It's about how a food makes you feel. So if you don't feel that shellfish is going to suit you because you have this information that it's a bottom feeder and that it's high in mercury, if that's in your, you know that's part of what you know and what you feel, then don't eat it. But there's a lot of people who sort of know that, but it doesn't really penetrate them, and they're not interested and they love it and they're going to eat it. This is a frequency thing again.
Right. So
I really believe it's sort of eat shellfish with love in your heart and no fear, and you'll probably be fine with it. You know, I mean, I don't know if that is definitely the outcome, but I do think that's the kind of approach, because we've got to a point now where there's so much fear around food. Not just, is it toxic? Is it this? Is it that? It's more, it's more sort of, is it going to make me fat? Is it going to make my skin look good? Is it, you know, it's a lot about vanity now. And so that's fear. It's like, we've got to get out of that.
That's interesting. It's not, I don't see so many people like that in my own clientele. For me, I find I'm doing like really basic education around food. I have a practice in New York City, and a lot of people eat tuna sandwiches, and I've seen like mercury poisoning in my office, and I'm like, well,
really?
You know, what do you eat? Oh, and they give you a menu of what they eat, and like people are eating like tuna and mayonnaise sandwiches like 5 days a week, and have done for like 10 years, and I'm like, have you ever heard about mercury in tuna? No. It's like this really basic level of education that's trying to just, even before I get into talking about frequency, I need to talk about just really simple information, that what we eat becomes what we are. Look at what you're eating. Don't think that everything in the supermarket is safe for you. It's you know, you want to actually avoid a supermarket and eat maybe 5 things in the supermarket are really good for us if they're organic, right? It seems like so much basic education. But let me ask you, so with the frequency of food, obviously there's a a really clear difference in frequency between food that is fresh and food that is cooked, and food that is perhaps been fresh, been cooked, and then been processed and turned into some sort of packaged food. So how do you advise people around that frequency and the levels of, let's say, disturbance to the vital force of the food?
I think that's such an excellent question. And I think, sort of going back to the question before, so first, just to say that absolutely the basic level of education for food, if that's needed, then that needs to be delivered in a very, nice and clear way, without too much of our own opinion. Yeah, I think that's really important, because we have to deliver things with an unbiased
fact. Simple, yeah.
But yeah, that is very, very important. And then in view of trying to educate people on the level of frequency, if you like, of food, then yeah, it's that thing again. We have to sort of say, well, look, if it's just come out of the ground, the vital force is at its most potent. This is where it's all about. So, if you as close as you can get to something that has literally come out, that's fresh out of the ground, that's the best thing ever that you could possibly do. It has got this this energy around it. We know this with Kerlane photography. You see the frequency around the food, and that's going to feed your body so much more than a supposed health food, superfood that's been sitting around in a packet for a long time. But so people really need to just, look, it would be in an ideal world, everybody would be growing their own food, right? So
without pesticides.
Without pesticides. So locally grown food that's organic is obviously the clear answer. That's what we need to gravitate towards. So if people can, you've got to look at people's lifestyle. But yeah, if people obviously want to only buy organic, everyone has to step into that. And people, it's obviously very difficult because it's very expensive. There is quite a big difference, especially in the US with organic food. But people just have to understand that this is the only real choice. We have to do this, not just because for our own health, but for the planet, because we consciously, it needs to be a collective consciousness. So everyone needs to just go, okay, it's not even a choice to eat conventional food anymore. Because it's a bit like saying, I'm only going to drink amazing water. I know people that just will not drink any other water than spring water, and people and they travel all over the world. And it's amazing because they just find it everywhere they go, because that's their intention. So if you just say, I only eat organic food, that's what I said. I don't eat any other food, because I don't. And I don't ever have a problem eating. I don't. And if I'm in a situation where it's just not organic, I'm just like, that's fine. I just have something else. I just drink some really great available liquid to me. But people have to just be like that about it.
When I'm in that situation, what I do, like say I'm in the middle of nowhere and like there's just one thing that I can eat and I know that it's not particularly like super high frequency, I also just do that blessing of like, I bless this food will be highly nourishing, it will be the best food that I can eat, because I really believe too that we have that ability to change the frequency of everything around us. We constantly are creating the world around us. So also just folks, if you're ever stuck in the middle of some place where you just need to eat something and it's not the best, bless it. I always do a gratitude prayer over the food as well and change the frequency.
I'm definitely in agreement with you.
Yeah, and all those water experiments with Dr. Emoto prove that. Yeah,
exactly. No, they do. So I think if you're at that place and that's something that is part of you, like it is part of you, then I think that's a really lovely approach. And one of my teachers at school, I remember, used to say, eat pizza alone. Eat lentils alone or pizza with friends. So it's that kind of mentality, like, are you going to eat McDonald's with love in your heart? Not that we should ever eat McDonald's, ever, but are you going to eat something that's really not very healthful for you, but eat it with love in your heart, laughing?
That gives lentils a bad rap, doesn't it?
No.
I love lentils.
I know, I love lentils too, but it was just a very stark example. We were early on, nutritional students, and it was to put into perspective this idea that we're not going to get into this dogma, you know.
Make it soft and
make
gentle.
it soft. Yeah. Bring levity to a situation.
Right.
I've spent many years feeling, I'm an extremely passionate person, and almost to my detriment sometimes. And when I first started off as a naturopath, I had so much information. I felt like I had sort of government secrets. I was like, I can't believe what's going on in the world, and I was a nightmare for people. People probably think I'm a bit extreme now, but so I just thought we've got to bring levity to this in order to inspire. We've got to sort of say, well, look, let's just try and be balanced, but be balanced with a really strong intention. Mm-hmm. So, because otherwise people are like, everything's okay in moderation. People that say everything's okay in moderation when they're not eating organic, they're not eating locally, they're eating out of packets, are usually people that are eating all that kind of stuff most of the time, and that's their sort of mantra for, oh, it's okay to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm just going to do this when I want. But we really have to do this very, very occasionally, and if we are going to do this and eat food that just hasn't got a high vibration, because of the source it's come from as well. It's the poor food. You've got to feel really sorry for that carrot or that genetically modified corn. I mean, it's just so deeply sad what it's had to endure. And then you're consuming it. It's a lot. Mm-hmm. So I think we just really have to sort of have our intention about how we want to eat. It's how we want to eat rather than what we're eating. It's how. How am I going to eat first? I'm going to eat, with love in my heart. I'm going to eat with joy. I'm going to not judge myself too much, but I'm really going to eat with the choice of, eating the best, freshest, most organic, most ethically correct, foods.
Because we are what we eat.
We
very
are.
Clearly.
There's nothing you can do about that. You can't escape that truism.
Yeah.
It's not going away. It's there.
Yeah.
There's nothing. It is that. And
so when we're feeding our kids now, I know that we have like very elaborate plans of what we want for our young ones. Do you find that when you're working with children and with your own kids, that there are certain things that they just won't eat that is so good for them, and then you're trying to find ways to, like, let's use the word, sneak it into their smoothie or sneak it into their... Do you find that there are certain things that are crucial for children to eat?
I don't know. There's not one food that's crucial for children. The food groups that are crucial for children to eat. I mean, I'm really passionate about greens for children just because they're so mineral rich.
Greens.
Greens.
So what do you mean by greens?
Greens, I mean all types of leafy greens. So, collards, kale, wild greens, dandelion, all of that, spinach, anything that's green and leafy and edible. Mm-hmm. And the wild foods. The wild foods they're almost a food group in themselves these days.
So what do you mean by wild foods?
Well, wild foods, anything that's growing out there in the wild. So chickweed, nettles, all these kind of, they're all different depending on where you are in the States and Europe. The dandelions, the sorrel, wild rocket, you guys call it arugula.
You guys, I'm Australian.
I know, sorry.
We're in America, so
yeah, sorry,
Americans,
no.
yeah.
Americans. But wild foods, obviously so important for children because children are little wild beings. They haven't really been damaged by anything. They're so perfect, they're so pure, and a very small amount of wild foods because they're very potent. And this obviously includes seaweeds as well, the sea vegetables, because they're deep. They're so nutrient dense with the trace minerals also and the iodine and all of this. So small amounts of these foods, if you can sneak them in, my goodness, this makes a big difference. So you have to find your way. But I'm very much an advocate of cooking and not cooking. So keeping them raw, doing both. So children are getting some raw, really good high frequency greens into them, and they're also getting some cooked green, which obviously changes the way it feeds your body completely.
And what is the change? So when you're going from raw to cooked greens, what is the difference?
Well, energetically, on a frequency level, it just means that it feeds the body in a slightly, it provides energy, but it's a slower kind of energy, a slower release when it's cooked. Mm-hmm. When it's raw, it's a very quick type of energy because there's no damage to its field. It's really, really strong, quick energy.
Does that mean then you would prefer also to give raw earlier in the day and then cooked later in the day, so that your kids aren't awake all night? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not that it's going, a green smoothie at night, a raw green smoothie is not going to keep anybody awake. But absolutely, you can do that. And also when you're, as far as climate goes, when we're in England, we're not so much into the raw at all. We're cooking and we're keeping the constitution and the digestive fire stronger with the warming, the cooked kind of foods. So that really, really does depend on, where you're at. We live in Costa Rica, so we're kind of all about raw when we wake up because we can cope with it because the sun's there high in the sky, giving us a lot of vital force, a lot of energy. I mean, we're doing quite a lot of raw stuff first thing in the morning, and that works really, really nicely, the raw greens. But greens also are brilliant for children because they stop the child they help prevent a child from getting into this sugar story. Okay, because children are very milky and sweet, and right from the breast milk, they want their kefir. They need to be fed with milky, sweet kind of foods from early on. So if they start moving into the sort of the sugary foods, the very, very high, high glycemic index foods. So we're talking about, things like tropical fruits, a lot of tropical fruits.
Bananas.
A lot of that. Or a lot of, sweets, artificial stuff, okay? Because all these artificial things are hidden in all these kind of foods for kids, even oatmeal and stuff like this, or cookies. Then the child will get very fixed on this and very hooked into the sugar. That's why children are really hooked into sugar, because they need that sweet kind of nourishment. So they gravitate more towards sugar than an adult, say. So you have to be careful. This is the time to get it right. And greens really help take away.
In childhood.
Yes. And greens really, they are brilliant. If you can get greens into your child every day, that I see typically in my clinic, and I've seen it personally with my kids, the children are less drawn to these high sugary foods when they've got more greens in their diet.
In America, there is a huge problem with obesity, and I know that it's growing all over. The world is growing fat. And of course, we can look at what people eat. I see so many children in my practice that are overweight, and I ask the dietary questions, what are the kids eating? And the mothers say, I try so hard to get healthy foods, and they just won't eat it. How do we get those wonderful little children to eat healthy food? What do you do?
Well, the first thing I do is I have to get a really good understanding of what's happened to this child over the course of from in utero. I just want to say this because this is really, really important.
Very important.
How the child was grown is critical. Inside in utero is critical to the child's eating profile.
So how the mother was eating during pregnancy, what's her mind?
Well, not what she was eating. What was this child grown on? If this child was grown on sort of white bread and Oreos and milk and these kind of low vibration, low nutritional foods, then the child is going to, look, studies show this. This isn't just something that, I've made up. We absolutely know this. These children are going to gravitate towards these kinds of foods. They are not going to gravitate because a mother that's eating that kind of stuff more than likely isn't going to be very educated on diet. So therefore the child is going to grow up sort of being fed the standard American baby diet, which is rather worrying because most of these baby foods are processed and pasteurized and have little or no nutrition at all. And they're being brought up on formula. Obviously breast milk is critical to how the child is going to thrive. Children are not thriving if they're not given breast milk. I'm sorry, but that's just what we know. We know that. And this formula milk is it's a really strange kind of situation that we're in because it's creating it's compromising the gut. So the gut is where everything comes from. That's where all the absorption happens. So we've got to look at what was the child's start in life. That gives me a good idea about how quickly we can move. Because I treat children, when I work with children, I work very, very gently. Because children are actually amazingly easy and a pleasure to treat because they're so intelligent. They know everything. Their body is they're
more in tune, yeah?
And they don't even know that. You don't have to have that conversation with a child. And you don't have to start telling a child, well, look, this is what's going to happen, sweetheart. You can't eat that anymore. No more Cheerios. It doesn't work like that. So Because if a child has one thing that it eats every day, there's no way you can take that away from a child. Because your children are extremely routine. And they need that. That's their emotional setup. That's how we kind of, they feel emotionally stable. They need the same thing happening more or less every day. So the way we work is we start including things. So, for example, with a child...
So you wouldn't be substituting it, but more just bring other things in?
Not yet. The
Right.
first thing I do is we look at the child's diet, and the mother will be like, oh, God, it's awful, he'll only eat Cheerios for breakfast, and he'll only, So say that's the example. So I'm like, okay, and I'm like, what do you want him to eat for breakfast? She's like, well, just anything else. So then we find out what the child likes to eat, and the first thing would be great if the child's into smoothies, then we're going to make a smoothie first thing, and we're going to make a smoothie that the child likes. If the child likes chocolate, if the child likes blueberries, if the child likes, Oreo cookies, whatever it is, we're going to try and make that smoothie taste like that. And we can do that with the most incredible nutritional foods. So we can get like a really nice protein powder that's made from fermented brown rice or something like this as a base, so they're getting their protein source. And then we can add in some fruits, we can add in some really lovely nutrient-dense little superfoods, we can add in little bits of seaweed, we can add little bits of goji berries, blueberries, we can throw in some little bit of frozen banana in there. We can make this shake really incredible, so that when the child, so we kind of go like, hey, listen, we've got this, I've made this amazing milkshake. It's so delicious. Do you want some? And we know that this shake is going to fill them up. From a nutritional standpoint, this shake will tick all those boxes for the child.
Right.
So we start like that. Or if they're like, no, they're not into shakes, I have a lot of amazing muffin, pancake recipes, which are, made with really healthy fats and proteins like almond flour, coconut flour, even chickpea flour, these kinds of things.
So you're staying away from wheat, and you're staying away
I'm staying away from grains, really, with the
yeah.
kids. So what we do is, if the child's really into chocolate muffins or pancakes, we make these incredible pancakes, which is just basically eggs and almond flour and vanilla and a little bit of, tiny bit of maple syrup and some grass-fed butter, something like that. And this is a fantastic start to the day. And the kids are like, pancakes for breakfast, oh my goodness, this is great. And we start trying to say, hey, do you want to try this? And we don't say you can't have the Cheerios. It's just that what happens in my clinical experience, it's amazing what happens after it can happen after 3 days. It might take 3 weeks. It won't take longer than a month.
But you're offering something actually
You're offering
better.
You're not talking about the Cheerios.
Yeah.
The Cheerios probably will come up, especially for the first probably 3 or 4 days. Oh, can I have my Cheerios now? You're like, absolutely, sweetheart. And then suddenly the child won't ask for those Cheerios anymore, because it's really happy with what's happened. And the mother hasn't had this chat, darling, you can't eat these Cheerios anymore. They're not good for you. Because if you do that, you're passing judgment on something.
Right.
And you're creating a story around something. And when you say to a child you can't have something, they're going to...
Want it even more, of course.
Exactly. So that's how I work with children. And I
just have to add that with that, it does take a lot more input from the family, from the mother, from the father, whoever's preparing the food. Because
we have to lead by example as well.
Yeah.
So this is the first thing I always say to parents. You have to inspire your children in a non-judgmental way. So you don't inspire them by saying, we can't do this because da-da-da-da. You don't do that. You just eat. They just see you preparing this beautifully fresh food.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is the actual preparation time that so many people, when I talk to them about eating healthy food, for them it's always, but it takes so long. If in the morning I don't have to tip it out of the box.
But listen, I know, but you need to...
That's that whole love thing of like nurturing ourselves and actually taking the time to look after ourselves properly.
Yes, but it's the no time consciousness thing.
Yeah.
It's like poverty consciousness.
Exactly.
People are in this no time... And people are just like, look, you're in a little drama here of you've got no time. You got to get out of that because everyone's doing the same thing. No one's got any time who's got a child in the morning. Nobody. Sorry, but nobody has. So you either have, pouring something into a bowl and pouring some milk on, that is 5 minutes faster than whipping some eggs, putting some almond flour, a little bit of salt, a little bit of vanilla, pouring it into a pan, bam, 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 on a plate. That really takes maybe 5 minutes longer. Yeah. And if you haven't got 5 minutes longer, then you're kind of in that's not a great place to be with a child. Children need to feel that there's time. Yeah. If children are being rushed out of the door, get up earlier. There's always a way. There's a way to always have time for everything. Yeah. And I just don't accept that I don't have time. It's just this crutch that people have. And I mean, I used to be like that too.
Yeah.
I don't have time because I just didn't want to make the time. And I know it's, you know...
But I think it's so important that we take the time back to really be there, to feed our families, to look after ourselves, because we're so inside that little rat race model. And I think that's one of the really big ways of breaking away from you know, this rat race, is actually just looking after ourselves properly and letting everything have its time and place.
No, absolutely.
Really key. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And when I've done this sounds a little bit harsh, but I do this with my children, and I advise other mothers to do it with their children because it works. And that is that, you know, if the child isn't cooperative, which is often the way, so the child doesn't want to get up, isn't like into the breakfast, doesn't get the morning routine, isn't getting it, then you've tried like getting them up earlier or doing, you know, what you can do. If they're not getting it, then it's just the fact that they don't get breakfast. You know, there might be a few mornings where it's like, look, unless we do this, we can't leave the door. You have to eat in the car. Children need to learn. They need to understand that if they're not going to cooperate, then something is not going to flow. There is that situation sometimes. My children are like, oh, I haven't, and I'm like, we're going to make breakfast now. They're like, oh no, I'm not ready for breakfast. I'm like, okay, well you have to eat it in the car. This is the time frame we have. We've made as much time as we can. But when children realise that actually mum can't kind of, you know, she can't put more minutes in an hour.
She doesn't have 8 arms.
No, she doesn't have 8 arms, and she can't put more minutes in an hour, or the 20 minutes they have to actually cook them, make the breakfast, prepare it. The child needs to get that, because otherwise, and so because children learn so quickly. It's like if you say to a child, look, you know, if we don't actually get our shoes on, we're going to miss the bus. Right. They're going to miss the bus, and you have to let a child miss the bus sometimes. Right. And so the child realises it can't go to school, and the child won't like that because it wants its routine. I know it's a little bit, but it does work with children because that's what it's like. You know, the real world is like that.
ADHD is a very big problem, as we know, in America, and also there are so many diets now too around various autism, on the spectrum of autism. Are there certain foods that you believe children should eat that will help with those conditions at all?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So ADD and ADHD is we work very, very well with this using the long chain fatty acid of omega-3, the DHA.
For both. Right.
It seems to have an almost immediate result after about a week.
So in what form? What should they eat?
Well, fish is obviously where you get this long chain fatty acid from. It's the fatty acid that makes up the cerebral cortex, and it's so important. It's the fat that's laid down in the baby's brain in utero.
What happens if we don't eat fish?
Well, if we don't eat fish, then we need to get it from a supplemental source of sort of marine phytoplankton or marine algae. And it's really, really easily available. You obviously have to find a good, clean source that's been, you know, they've properly cleaned it, and it will say that on the back. You need to get a really high grade source of it. But marine phytoplankton is just marine phytoplankton, and you can buy this in lots and lots of different health food stores now, and it's incredible. You need a tiny amount for children for it to have an effect.
Like how small?
You need sort of a couple of dropperfuls for children, and it works really nicely. But now I'll work with the marine algae oil. If a child is really deficient in DHA, which is, we can see this on blood tests, but we can also tell just from the way the child is interacting, the way the child, you know, just the child's case history. Well, if a child is extremely hyperactive, for example, and just has no concentration at all, we're talking like sort of 2 minutes at a time, can't sort of sit still. Right. It's up and down, up and down, up and down. And
which conventionally they would be given Ritalin or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely, which is just, you know, disaster and actually makes it worse long term. But no, the DHA, you want to use a lot, something like you want to use about 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams, which is a huge amount for children for the first sort of 10 days to completely saturate the body in it. And it calms, it also works on the adrenal cortex, so it calms these children down. So a lot of these kids have already got a lot of cortisol running around their body because they're actually in a sort of fight or flight state, because they can't relax.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah, so they're very depleted.
They're really, really depleted. And they've got B vitamin, they're depleted in B vitamins and magnesium, which are the critical the critical mineral and vitamin that gets depleted with this, overuse of cortisol. And so when you get them on a high dosage of DHA, B vitamin complex, like a probiotic B vitamin complex with B6, B12, B3, this kind of thing in there, at quite a high dose. And
as a supplement.
Yeah. And the other thing that works beautifully is magnesium oil, used transdermally. So you massage your child every night, if you can, twice a day in this magnesium oil, because then it doesn't.
It's all over the body.
Yeah, and it bypasses the gut. A very good way to find out if a child's deficient in magnesium is to put a little bit of magnesium oil on the back, and the child will start itching. If they're deficient.
So if they need it, they will start to itch.
Yeah, and this could be a little bit of a problem at the beginning. And some people are like, I can't do it. My child's scratchy, and she's like, no, I hate it. So then what you do is you get a magnesium glycinate in a supplemental form, or an ionic magnesium, which is fun. All the ionic minerals are fantastic for children. They're so absorbable, and they're easy to put into drinks and smoothies and hide, because they have no strong taste. If a child's doing capsules, if a child's swallowing things, you give them sort of 500 to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium glycinate, and it works beautifully. The DHA, the magnesium, the B vitamins.
And what foods would you recommend?
And then obviously you've got to keep them on a really low GI diet, and I get rid of all the grains.
Low GI? What do you mean by low GI?
Glycemic index. So foods that are slow release.
Like what?
Like things like, all kinds of berries, all kinds of oats, things like this, if you don't add any sugar to it. Proteins, so anything from legumes to grass-fed animal products. I emphasize grass-fed animal products, because grain-fed animal products have a completely different GI because they've been fed grains. So, and also with any kind of grass-fed animal fat is also very good for these children. And another critical thing is, and this is more specific to autism, is because with autism we need to get the integrity of the bowel, of the intestinal bacteria right, because we know in these autistic children they have compromised guts, and most of them are born with leaky gut syndrome. And there's an amazing woman called Campbell Bride, Natasha Campbell Bride, who's written the GAPS diet, which is very popular amongst the autistic community, and it's fabulous. It works brilliantly, and these broths, and to start off with, the bone broth is fantastic for children, and to use fermented foods. I'm really into fermented foods for children. Whatever they like, ferment it. Children tend to like cucumbers, for example, so we pickle cucumbers, and they love them. My kids love sauerkraut, so do all their friends, so we make a lot of sauerkraut, because this is so important that we get this culture correct in their stomach. They're not being compromised. Their immune system is not being compromised by all this sugar and all this rubbish.
Right. And so many of our cultures, our like your background, my family, I'm Hungarian, and the Europeans and the Koreans, we all have, the Japanese, we all have these fermented products in our diet. I grew up every day eating sauerkraut or pickles of some sort.
Well, that's an incredible start, and I think a fermented food should be on a child's plate at least once a day. That is in an ideal world. So that is one of the key food groups that you want to get in there. It's not difficult for children, because they actually really like strong flavors, and they like salt. Of course, children like salt, and so I think. I just take out, we just kind of really try and move out all the processed stuff, slowly but surely, like I said before, without it being, too strict. But we've got to move those out so we can get the nourishment in. Because once the magnesium fills up, once that magnesium mineral is complete in the body, and the child's getting it every day, it just relaxes the whole nervous system. The child does change. So with DHA and magnesium alone, we see huge differences, even within a week. And then you throw the DHA, a high dosage of long-chain fatty acid, on top of that, you also see a difference. Because it's also about the inflammation in the body. Yeah, so the omega-6 causes a lot of inflammation from all these, all these grain feds and grains, and so we need to kind of, move out of that a little bit more.
So if we could just give like a list of the key food groups that need to get into our beautiful little babies' bodies daily. And I know that your book outlines these very clearly, and we'll talk about your book in a minute, but what are those absolute groups or foods that we must get into them?
Well,
daily?
Daily, yeah. Well, greens, absolutely. Wild foods, and that includes sea vegetables, wild edibles. That includes also sprouts, if you can start sprouting. Sprouting is amazing for children. And then you want to get the fermented foods in there. And then you want to get some kind of grass-fed animal product into a child, if you can. They need that kind of saturated fat. That really benefits them.
That could be butter.
It could be butter. It could be grass-fed animal meat. It could be wild salmon, a wild type of fish.
And what about...
It could be cheese. It could be...
the cheeses.
The cheeses. I mean, the best kind of cheese, because children do love cheese. It's that milky, kaffir, salty thing they love. So if you can get the best cheese possible, obviously it depends where you live, but you know, the best cheese you can get is obviously raw, you know, unpasteurized cheese. And goat's cheese is a better option because it's you know, it's not so much casein in it, and it's easier for the child to digest. And then obviously fruits and vegetables, seasonal fruits and vegetables, and a lot of them, and find out what the child really, really likes, and put them into soups and stews and smoothies. And I mean, my big trick is obviously trying to get a child into a smoothie a day or some kind of drink, whether children like milkshake, do a thick, you know, make it how the child likes it. And within that drink, you can also really hide some amazing things. So the superfoods that I love for children. So I love things like, I love maca for a child.
Can you just describe what maca is for a lot of people that are not living in Central America?
Well, maca is a Peruvian root vegetable, and it's a kind of adaptogen, so it adapts to what your body needs. If your body needs to sleep, it'll help you sleep. If your body needs a bit more energy, it'll give you a bit more energy. And a lot of people have been using it for hormones because it's quite a yang herb. It sort of really builds the yang. It's good for the testosterone. But it's actually amazing for girls and boys because it helps, because girls and boys are changing hormonally, you know, as they go through these little changes from being little people to going into puberty. But maca is very adaptogenic, and a little bit of it is great for them, but it's so rich in calcium. It's got a lot of calcium in there. And
is there anything that is coming from Europe or America, only because of this whole, like, you know, eating local?
Yes,
is there anything that's like maca that's not from Peru?
Well, obviously maca is a root vegetable, so so if you've got sweet potatoes or yams growing locally, then use these in a smoothie. They're absolutely beautiful, and you can eat them raw as well in a smoothie. But any kind of really, you know, you want this root-based, you want some root-based stuff in their diet because it grounds them down. So, but other superfoods, I mean, obviously all the omega-3 seeds, things like hemp seeds, chia seeds, flax seeds. If you can get something really, really fresh and you really know where it's come from, that's great to put 1 or 2 tablespoons of that into their smoothie.
Right, and be really careful with the seeds that you're not getting rancid seeds or seeds that have been out for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You have to be aware of that. But you know, if you're going to a really good organic supermarket, then they will hopefully have some good stuff there.
Let's give the people a list of things, adults, infants, babies, humans. What are the foods that people should never ever eat, never touch, never ingest?
Genetically modified foods.
Yeah, right.
Artificial sweeteners. And they should really, really avoid pasteurized dairy. And of course, these glutinous grains. These are things that are really damaging our immune system, our gut, our spiritual health. They're damaging our livers.
Glutinous grains. So what are the glutinous grains?
Well, wheat, some kind of oats. You can get gluten-free oats, but it's really this bread, the bread thing. And you know, we need to kind of get rid of the bread as being as part of our diet. You can make gluten-free bread. If you're going to make bread, then make it gluten-free and try and make it, you know, you want a really heavy, solid bread, like 100% rye or 100% rice and yucca and this kind of heavy flours.
And you're saying gluten-free because of the inflammation that it creates in the body?
Yes, I mean, it is just what it says, it's glue. And it really compromises the immune system because it sticks to the intestines, which is where most of the immune system resides. and it is it's hugely allergenic. But it's more that we're not the wheat today. It's not the wheat of even 20 years ago.
Right.
So it's a hybrid type of wheat, and it's just not designed for the human body. It just creates this inflammation. It starts this root of the disease, and it's highly addictive. You know, gluten gives you that opiate. It releases the opiates in the brain. It's very addictive. So it would be great to sort of get that out. And of course, you know, the artificial sweeteners, I mean, I don't really need to explain that. It's just so dangerous. They're just so dangerous. I can't believe the FDA haven't, and I'm sure this year aspartame will be taken out of all the foods. It will be, you know, not allowed. I hope so, because it's causing brain damage in rats and and enormous problems to people's livers. And high fructose corn syrup is obviously, never touch a food with high fructose corn syrup in, and never touch any foods that have chlorine, fluoride, or bromine. And bromine really does go along with these baked goods.
All the breads and
these are all neurotoxins. They displace iodine, which is critical. This is why we need our sea vegetables in children. And just quickly going back to your last question, iodine. I recommend all children that have any kind of behavioral disorder should get an iodine loading test, because invariably they've got a deficiency in iodine, which really, really affects their behavior. So the iodine is huge. So we want to keep away from those toxic halogens.
So how about if we actually make a green smoothie now?
Oh, brilliant.
And we'll use a test subject, a young child, and we'll see what we can sneak in there.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, let's go.
Let's go. Brilliant, guys. Okay, well, we're gonna make a typical green smoothie, a really easy one with some fantastically nutritious ingredients. So,
and our test subject.
And we've got we're very lucky to have our guest subject here, Una.
Hi.
Who actually is a bit of an experienced green smoothie drinker, but we're going to make something that she's not really used to having, a slightly different green smoothie, and test it on her. So we've just got some lovely fresh organic spinach here, and we're going to put about a cupful in.
Annelie, is it also, you could put kale, you could put...
any wild, any leafy green, organic, or wild green, something like that. And we're going to use some fruit here. We're going to use some lovely organic grapefruit. There's lots of succulent juice in there. Grapefruit and oranges are fantastic in a green smoothie. We're going to throw in a banana to sweeten it, to give it some thick and creaminess to it. And then we've got some wonderful berries here. We've actually got cherries as well. We've got some wild blueberries underneath here. And we're going to throw in about a cupful of that. In we go. And now we're going to get into the superfoods here, because we have some spirulina here, which is a great source of protein for children, and also a really fantastic bioavailable source of iron, and of course lots of B vitamins. So I'm going to put in about a teaspoon of spirulina, and I'm also going to put in some bee pollen, which is also another fantastic source of protein, of amino acids, and tons of B vitamins. It even has B12 in, so it's great for vegans, and also wonderful antioxidant. So we'll put about a teaspoon of bee pollen in there.
Annelie, it's important too with the bee pollen. We keep these here actually in our house. It's important to keep to use honey or bee pollen that's within a 100-mile radius of where you live.
We have to be really mindful about the bee pollen.
Yeah.
I think we're more gravitating towards flower pollen now, because it's becoming a bit of an ethical issue, and we have to, it's a lot of hard work for these bees to collect all this pollen.
Yeah, that's a lot of bee work.
That's a lot of bee work. So we're kind of gravitating more towards the flower pollen. So, if we can get flower pollen, that would probably be our first choice. And then we're just going to throw in some raw cacao nibs, because we talked earlier about kids needing a lot of magnesium and a lot of B vitamins. And these guys are packed full of magnesium, and packed full of lots of other great minerals like manganese and phosphorus and calcium.
Lots of brain food, right?
This is brain food. Yeah, and these
make you really, really smart.
Yeah,
even smarter than you already are.
And always with a green smoothie, because within the greens you have quite a few of the fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A and vitamin D and some vitamin K in there. You want to absorb those vitamins, so you need a little bit of fat in there. And we're just going to choose to put in a little bit of coconut oil, which is a fabulous medium-chain fatty acid, great for children, really hydrates their brain, great for the skin.
Oh, and that's all you need, that little.
Yeah, just a little bit.
So it's
in
almost
there.
half a teaspoon.
Yeah, almost half a teaspoon.
Uh-huh.
That's all you need. Or you can go for any other kind of cold pressed oil like flax or hemp, but coconut oil is a great choice. And I always like to put a little bit of sea salt, because it just really kind of gives it a little bit more, adding a little bit more minerals. And then some water. So we're going to put in about a cup of water, because we've actually got some grapefruit in there. So the grapefruit's going to juice up for us a little.
And I just have to say that.
I mean, look at that. That is gorgeous.
we always put a blessing in our water for gratitude and love to change the structure of the water.
That is so beautiful. I love that. Okay. So here we go.
So that goes for quite a long time, yeah?
Yeah, it does. You just want it, because it's also for Una, we want it to be really, really smooth. So I'm just going to test it just to make sure that it's yummy. That is yummy, Una. I think you're going to like it. You've really got some of the grapefruit coming through, but lots of that berry goodness. And it's actually a perfect temperature. The other thing about greens is you don't, if you want to drink this first thing on an empty stomach, let's pop a straw in there for you, sweetheart. And tell us the verdict. Be honest. You don't want the smoothie to be freezing cold, so try and use room temperature water, because first thing on an empty stomach, you want something to warm up the digestive fire. So that's kind of room temperature. Oh,
it's hard because it's so thick. You can just drink it if you want, yeah? No?
Yeah. It's delicious.
Do you really like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, careful, Susie. You can share my glass with me. That's pretty yum. And I know Susie absolutely is all about the berries. I've seen her put in about
I love berries.
About a gallon of berries. So
they're great.
This is berry
Antioxidants,
goodness,
right?
This is berry goodness. This is the very, very goodness smoothie.
You like it?
Do you like that?
Yeah.
And it isn't terribly sweet. That's one banana for sort of 3 people. So, do you like that?
Yeah. There's so many layers. You can you're tapping in and you can taste everything almost as you're going through. It's great.
And I think, with one of the great things about these superfoods and about throwing everything together in a smoothie is it becomes an alchemical thing. Everything sort of potentiates the action of everything else. Everything's complementing each other, which really helps with the absorption. So it's a kind of a bit of a nutritional love story.
A nutritional love story?
Yeah. So,
romance.
So you think would you be happy to drink that first thing in the morning, that smoothie?
Yes.
Yeah? Fantastic. Okay, good. Well, that is the green smoothie challenge right there. So you see how easy this is. It's just so simple. And you have to just find the right smoothie that works for you. There's so many variations. And this is a very simple, very easy one. All accessible foods.
Do you remember what we put in ours in the mornings?
We put in spinach, blueberries, strawberries, and a lot of other berries. Sometimes we put in lemon oil, what's it called? Something like that. And that's all I can actually remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds delicious.
And Una, how old are you?
9.
9 years old.
Yeah,
And
I'm
look at
turning
this
10
look at
in
this
March.
healthy lunch child.
You have the perfect glow of a green smoothie girl. You need to start the green smoothie revolution amongst all other 9-year-olds. Yeah? It's a global movement.
You take them to school.
No
sometimes.
responsibility at all, but I want you to inspire others, because if every kid could have a green smoothie in the morning, it would be the most amazing upgrade in their health. Absolutely, wouldn't it, Susie?
Yeah, and sometimes you take them to school as well for lunch. You have them with your lunch, and Una's unusual too in her school in that she's the only vegetarian in her class too. So she's been talking a lot. Not that we're in any way saying that vegetarianism is the only way to live, but it's the way that we live, and we choose to live spiritually, to do no harm to others. Ahimsa, yeah.
Yes.
So Annelie, your book Raw Food Power is absolutely fabulous, and this is the product also from your life in Costa Rica, and I love the stories that you have here of going to Costa Rica. Annelie's had an amazing life. She grew up in England, actually on a farm, and ate vegetables from your farm every day. You grew up with very, very, very superfoods all the time. And then Annelie became a stunt woman and was working in films and was like, you worked in the Golden Compass and you were doubling for Nicole Kidman, doing all of her magic stunts, and she is very strong and very powerful in her physical body. And also then you changed your life completely. You became a naturopath, went back to school, and then had kids, and then was still doing stunt work while having kids, while being a naturopath, and then you ended up in Costa Rica. So what was the trigger that made you move to Costa Rica?
I just really wanted to be in nature, really properly in nature, and I had my big sort of ambition was to be barefoot for 1 year and wear no shoes, because it's just, I think one of the best things you can do for your health is to be barefoot and completely connected.
Grounding.
Yeah, the grounding, it's huge. And the science is there now. Clint Ober, the whole story of the grounding and the positive ions been sucked out by the earth. It's incredibly beneficial for the immune system. And so I just wanted to be able to have this experience. And so we decided to move to Costa Rica, and we are still barefoot after 3 years. I hardly ever put shoes on unless I go to the city, and it is just the best way of life. And we were living in the jungle, in and out of the jungle. Now we're sort of living on the beach, but it has been such a incredible experience. It's extremely energizing living so close to such raw nature, and really having to live out of the jungle from the tropical fruits and everything that's accessible to us, because it's pretty remote.
And that's where you've written your second book too, Kids Go Green.
Yes.
Which is on your website now.
The superfoodfamily.com. You can find Kids Go Green, which is a great, very content-rich book, which is offering up a lot of solutions of how to get our kids super healthy and super vibrant, with lots of tricks and tips and a lot of information in there.
Fabulous.
So
Annelie, in the Love Now Movement interview series, we travel around the world and we ask all of our interviewees, what is love?
Wow. That's deep. Love for me is a series of blissful moments. That's what love is for me.
Just and what brings about the bliss?
Oh, well, anything that creates bliss. So chocolate, great green smoothies, great moments. You see, for me, there can be a moment of love with a complete stranger, an exchange, going through some sliding doors, a moment, they're just moments, and they can be with anybody or anything. They can be with a plant, they can be with a food. For me, I get a lot of pleasure just through going on a beautiful walk through a wood. They're just blissful moments where you just feel blessed and blissed out, and that to me is love.
Bliss. Bliss. So drink up, folks.
Yeah,
drink
cheers.
up, stay healthy, change the world, save the planet. Love now.